Well, 2013 is already over in terms of the South Dakota legislative session, even though we've got several months of this calendar year left. Senator Adelstein, share with our listeners your perspective on the 2013 legislative session. The good, the bad, and I think you've called the ugly.
The good was that we came up with a way to modernize our system for law enforcement and for punishment or rehabilitation.
So you think that judicial reform, that law enforcement,
I think it makes
that
great
was a
sense.
good thing in your view?
The Republican caucus in the Senate developed a new approach to the Office of Economic Development, a whole new economic development plan, which frankly the governor didn't like a lot of. For example, right now, all the members of the GOED that spend millions of dollars are answerable to no one but the governor. We, in this session, required advice and consent for every member. And we'll have 4 legislators listening at all of the open meetings. The bad part of it is that the governor, in my mind, exerted undue influence and quotes power on the legislators acting in the interest of their constituents. And when he said no to something, well, then no matter what the feeling was, I'll give you an example which would affect us in the Black Hills. I had 20 out of 35 senators signed on a bill that I sponsored to allow the importation of wine, which would meant the growing wine industry in South Dakota.
And it is a growing industry.
And especially if they could ship wine out,
yes,
which this bill would permit, particularly Prairie Berry would double their volume. The governor, and so that I had a majority. I mean, simple.
20 out of 35
right.
is a majority, no matter how you count it.
But when the bill came to committee, a young woman turned up in the committee. She wasn't even wearing what you and I used to call the blue badge, the technical.
Yes.
She was wearing the white badge from the governor's office, and she said, I'll never forget it, the governor agrees with the concept of this bill, but not now, because there's some problems with the revenue side and how to work it out. No one from revenue was there, no specifics. She left and the bill died in committee.
That sounds like a bill or two that I'm familiar with.
You bet.
The governor's kiss of death.
And the governor shouldn't have that. We represent the people. And how could a majority just be killed in committee if the governor disagreed with it? And it's absolutely unreasonable. And on top of that, you as a former senator, I had a letter. You'll like this, and I don't know if I should say, I'll say it. What happened, I had a letter from a lobbyist who'd been working with the governor supposedly on this bill, and the letter began, who told you to introduce Senate Bill, maybe it was 21, whatever it was. We've been working with the governor's office, and who's behind, and my answer back was, nobody told me to. I had the impression that I was an elected senator, and I have constituents who are in the wine business, and I did it.
Yeah, and you're perfect. That's what you're sent there to do.
Yes.
And the fact that someone would question it, it gives rise to
whatever kind of arrangement. Now, the terrible thing, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to look at the governor built $1 million war chest to run again 2 years before the campaign even. It'd be interesting to see how many employees or even owners of the 3 monopolistic wine producers. And that's, I'm only, I had so little time to talk about the session.
Well, let me ask you one final question about the session. During that time, I believe the legislature approved a $500,000 increase in spending for the legislative branch. What are your thoughts on that?
The theory on that is that we should be able to do, and I'm on the Appropriations Committee, that we should be able to not rely on the governor's numbers person, Although I think that numbers person is the most honest person in the governor's office, though he has to move the numbers. And we needed the more technical help in order to be a separate branch. But the question is, now that you make me have said that, what will we do with that technical help if the governor says no anyway?
Yeah, it sounds like maybe that's a ship whose destination is predetermined.
Yeah, with the other thing I didn't talk about, another major thing, I do it again sometime, is the $5 million. You would understand it, I think, better than I can explain it. He put in, first of all, he deliberately underestimated the revenue last year so he could do his cuts. And he put in then to use $5 million of that money to replace money he'd committed from the futures fund for this new big cheese factory, and
Yes.
which was in a bill that I voted for, which was killed. It was a good bill, and he had plenty of money. But he came back and he wanted to take some of the unspent money, that $5 million. Well, I made a speech across, I went the door to the House Appropriations Committee, and they deleted it, took it all out. It went through the House floor. The governor's, there was noises he'd like to get it back, didn't go. Came to the Senate Appropriation I serve on now again, there was no chance, went through the floor of the Senate. On the last day of the amendments, he got 4 of it back by twisting arms.
Well, the power of the bully pulpit, I guess.
Yeah, and he could have saved something that's really important to you and me, maybe in different ways, could have saved babies' lives. I had an amendment which would $500 and some thousand. I had $480,000, and the minority leader in the House had one for $400, about the same, about $800,000 to increase Medicaid help to prenatal care.
Oh yes, yeah.
And we had all the records showed dying. In fact, the governor's wife had a study, and they sort of opposed. Mine was one of them. I think mine was for citizens in the state. The others were people that were undocumented aliens, but they're still women that were going to have babies that'll be citizens of South Dakota. Why should they either be born dead or crippled? No. Anyway, so he takes that $2 million.
Well,
$4 million back.
Sounds to me, Senator, like there are a lot of reasons that you would like to sit in that chair for a few months.
No, I don't want to sit in that chair. I want somebody else to sit in that chair.
Well, we'll see how that works out, but we appreciate you watching today, and we hope that this has been thought-provoking.